Hi everybody, welcome back to another installment of my Rome and Iberia solo wargaming campaign. This is going to be one of the final battles in this series. We'll pick this up again at a later time during the year, but right now we're fighting one of the last battle. This is Rome's reserves and resupply, trying to open up mountain passes to help the beleaguered Romans that are already in the Iberian Peninsula. Before we get started, I've made some changes to how I'm going to do this particular battle, and I'm going to go over that right now. I hope you'll find it interesting, is what I do. Okay, I've added some complexity to my solo wargaming scenario. Cards. Yeah, I know a lot of games have cards in them, but it is what gave me my inspiration for this. So when you're playing solo, a lot of the times it's either a strict historical fight, it's problem solving, or it's top down, where you're like this overseer of the entire game. You don't have a real horse in the race. It's one of those where you want to just see how this plays out. That's how most of my games are, is I want to look down and see how this plays out. I don't want to have too much control. But I've been thinking about doing some problem solving, because I haven't done any videos with problem solving as part of the campaign. So I've decided to add some cards. Now, when I say I'm going to add cards, I'm not trying to change the game. I'm taking things that exist within the rule book, placing them on cards, which I ordered from like Amazon. They're blank playing cards, and I just type out some stuff in Word and glue them to the card. It's hard to print on playing cards because they have that sheen, that finish on there, and you got to take that all off, and I didn't want to mess with that, so I just typed some stuff out. But what I do is I put them in those little sleeves, and they have like a black backing on there, so you can't actually see the card itself, so I can shuffle them up and not worry about, having my own bias going, oh, I know what card that is because I made it. I don't want that to happen. So as you can see, some of these things, they're right out of the rule book. The Marauder special rule, add one to your, something like add one to your break test roll, maybe gives you a little chance to hang around, or, just little things like that to just give it a little bit of spice in the game. Now, I will say right now I've got 36 cards with special rules on them. I don't have all of them, obviously, because some of them just have to do with certain weapons and that sort of thing. But I also have, out of that 36, I have 12 blank cards in there. So the idea that you may pull something up that has nothing on it at all, if you're playing with an opponent, then you're going to have to figure out, well, can I bluff him to think that I have something so he burns up his card? Or like when I'm doing problem solving, maybe it will determine the way I move a particular unit, and then come to find out that opposite unit has nothing to give it any sort of an advantage, or me a disadvantage. I always find that kind of stuff interesting. So let's move on. So I will do a complete video on all that kind of stuff, but they're in this game. There's only 2 cards per side, 1 for each sub-commander. 2 of them get used in this first turn anyway, and you'll see that they have an effect. All right, let's talk about the Iberian tribes. Since we're fighting in the mountains, I think that the Iberian tribes, playing on their own home turf, should get some sort of an advantage. And so what I've decided to do is allow them to adopt open order and move between open order and closed order as need in this particular scenario. Because that's what they were really known for, was their foot speed, even after they became legionnaires in the Roman army, they were seen as a little bit different. They fought in a little bit looser formation. They moved a little bit differently, but yeah, they had different skill set, let's say, along with all the other skills that a regular Roman legionnaire would have. Okay, and so we've decided to do that. And now the Celtiberians, um, I wasn't sure whether I wanted to allow them to do it or not, so I put it in there, although I did not deploy them that way. So they will have that ability to go open or closed order as they see fit. All right, let's look at our deployment in this game. All right, at the top we have the Roman center, which is basically centered around a war elephant. Yes, war elephants were used in Iberia. Not very successfully, I might add, but they were brought over to try to intimidate the tribes and stuff. But, you know, war elephants were always a hit or miss proposition. Okay, in the lower left, we see the Roman right deployment. That's along with your horse archers, your couple of cohorts and some light infantry. And then down here on my right, on the screen's right, there is the Roman left, which has two cohorts, some Thracian cavalry, and a unit of slingers. Now, if you look into the top of that picture, you'll see a unit that's off the table. And that is because the Roman commander on this flank had gotten lucky enough to get the card, what I termed strategic brilliance. This is one in which he gets to take one unit from his division, place it in reserve. But what makes it different is it needs no order to come onto the table, but you will have to order it to do whatever you want it to do. So yeah, it gets to come on the table anytime you want, on any table edge, but you got to remember, it belongs to this division. So if this division commander, and you put him on the opposite side of the table, and they're playing on a 6x4 table, you got a lot of disadvantages to getting that order to go off. But that unit, which is some Illyrian infantry, light infantry with long spears. And as a matter of fact, that's what's on the other side of that cohort that's right in the middle there, is some more Illyrians with long spears. So yeah, that's kind of a mixed bag trying to make it into the Iberian Peninsula to help out the existing Roman forces. Okay, let's talk about the Iberian deployment. All right, up top, we see the Iberian center and a lot of the Iberian left. If you look down at the right-hand side, you can see where those two kind of mesh together. So you can see all those units in open order. Now, the one Celt-Iberian unit in the far back in that top picture, they're in closed order. Again, this is one of those where I think that they should have some sort of movement advantage over the heavy infantry of the Roman legion. And they demonstrated that on many occasions when you read the historical encounters with the Romans in Iberia. So I thought it was appropriate to give them that, especially the Scutari. On the bottom left, we see the Iberian right, which is very cavalry heavy. And that black mass there behind the cat, that's one of those cards that was dealt out. I got a little card holder for it. And so that way, you know, I can't see what that card says until I look at it. But in this game, I kind of know what they are, but they all have like certain phases in which they're going to take place. So it's not like I can use them whenever I want to. They're certain, and they only last for one turn. It's not like you get to play it over and over again. So let's keep moving on. Iberian orders phase. Let's get into this. Didn't get into it very much. They failed their division order. What a bummer. What a bummer. I was hoping that them being in open order and we get them moving and get them up there chucking some spears at the heavy Roman infantry, and didn't happen. Failed it. All right, the Iberian right. Cavalry charging down the hill. The infantry will advance as well. Now, if you look at this Thracian cavalry unit here on the left, for the Romans, at the end of that little arrow, they're really close to the table edge, not very far. So if they evade, they will evade off the table. But they're not open orders, so they don't get to do it automatically. They have to pass an order, which they did not. And so they wound up taking the charge. And you can kind of see the scorpion in front of the Roman legion. It gets contacted by that other cavalry unit, which will take closing shots, by the way. Here you can see the closing shots did 1 point of damage on that Iberian cavalry. And on the far right, you can see where the Iberian cavalry have taken 2 damage from the Thracian cavalry. Iberian combat phase. All right. Yeah. Again, you can see the card up there with the commander. You can see the ongoing combat here. The Thracian cavalry is shaken. And we'll see how this turns out for their break test. Oh, yeah, there we go. And the scorpion is now shaken. The Thracians were destroyed. And the scorpion held its ground, believe it or not. It held its ground, and it held its ground in good order, even shaken. So I rolled really high for those guys. Roman orders phase. Okay, now, bear with me here. This is a little out of order. I don't know why I didn't fix this, but I didn't. This is the Iberian commander's card that he got dealt. When your opponent fails a division order, you pick 1 unit in that division to roll on the blunder table. Now, there's a unit that's going to have an individual order given to it that was done prior to this. The photos here are out of sequence, so I'm kind of giving it to you a little backwards. This division order came after the individual order, okay? So I rolled a dice for each unit that's in the division that's on the table at the time, and the lowest dice roll will roll on the blunder table. And that was a unit of slingers. Of all things that the Iberians wanted to pull out of that battle line and do something to, it was a unit of slingers, and you know what they rolled? They rolled a 6 on the blunder table where they had that crazy advanced stuff. And so they run out 3 spaces right in front of the Celt Iberians. I thought of all the units to pull out of the battle line, it's the one that the Romans didn't mind you pulling out of their battle line. Okay, now we see the Roman reserve card come into play here. I thought this was an opportune moment. Whatever signal was used, you can think of like when Hannibal used his brother to ambush one of the Roman armies, I think it was one of the first battle of the Trivia or whatever it was, and, coming out of nowhere. And that's kind of this sort of scenario setup. Now, just because they're on the table, now they still have to pass an order to do something. And this is where I was talking earlier, where that division order that got failed came after this unit was giving it its order to charge, and it was successful. So he was successful in doing this, unsuccessful in getting the rest of his division to move. So, part of his grand scheme is working out, but not well. So let's talk about this combat that's going to happen up here between these Illyrian long spear guys and this cavalry unit. When they have long spears, they negate charge bonus. So countercharging into these Illyrians with long spears would not have done the cavalry any good whatsoever. It wasn't going to be that much of a move forward anyhow, because there wasn't that much distance between them. So I just foregone that and left that right where it was. And so we move into the combat. You can see that the Scorpion for the Romans is doing some stellar work here. They're really pounding on that cavalry unit. And the orders on the other side for the Romans, the other division, they were successful and they moved forward quite a bit. And you can see they're way out there. Again, that failing that order by the Iberians in the first turn, it kind of negates that advantage of their open order. But see, that's why you play the game. That's why you play it out. You know, you give them something, but if they don't take advantage of it, well, tough luck. So this may turn out to be just a straight up slugfest. And I'm telling you, I've played a lot of games with my Iberians, and in a straight up slugfest against Roman legionnaires, they don't tend to do very well most of the time. The exception is in the last battle report, and that one, if you haven't seen it, you should go back and look at it because it's funny. All right, here you can see all those units on the Roman right moving forward. You can see the horse archers went way far forward. They're going to launch some arrows at those open order Iberians, which they don't do anything anyway, so we can just move on from there. Roman shooting, obviously I just mentioned that the horse archers did nothing, and the slingers are able to do a point of damage on the Celt Iberians, which I thought was funny. Roman combat phase. All right. So now we've got these Illyrians charging in to these cavalry, these Iberian cavalry unit that had just trashed the Roman allied cavalry. And boom, they only lost by 2, but when you roll really low on the chart, it doesn't matter. Boom, they're gone. Here you can see that a victorious Iberian unit uses their victorious move to turn and face the other Iberian cavalry unit that is faced off against the Scorpion crew. The Scorpion crew finally bites the dust, and this brings us to a point of decision. What to do with this cavalry unit. Now, it says in the rulebook that you can use your victorious move to move out of combat. Now, as I'm looking at this, and I think, well, I can either use it to move forward into combat with a Roman cohort. Not a good plan when you have Illyrians in your flank with long spears. Not a good choice. But it is an option. And again, I like to take my decision-making, my biased decision-making, out of the mix as much as possible. So I rolled a dice. Do I move forward or do I move back? It was a straight up 50-50 dice roll, and they moved back, which I thought was fortunate. And I thought, you can see, and you could through gaming, if you've done a lot of this gaming, how that's the way you would play it, because staying there, they're going to get swamped. And there are historical precedents for cavalry moving in and seeing things are getting a little rough. I mean, they've already watched that unit that was to their right just gets absolute slobber knocked by those Illyrians with long spears. They probably want nothing to do with that. And after being in combat, suffering damage, they've decided that discretion is the better part of valor, and they moved away from the combat. And you can see the red dice up there indicating the 1 damage on those Celtiberians from the slingers. Here's another top-down view looking at the table. We have the victorious Illyrians on the left. We have the slingers in the center that have moved way forward. And up in the top right-hand corner, you can see that war elephant and those cohorts and stuff that are really deep. Now we come to some sort of decision making. Okay, have they advanced too far? They've opened up their flank. There's all kinds of historical precedents for when units do this sort of thing. That what happens to them when they do, if the opposing commander can take advantage of it. So in turn 2, there's going to be a lot of things to really kind of think about. What would this Iberian commander do? Would he continue to engage those infantry to his front that are fairly far away, or will he take the risk, turn his force, and go into the flank of the advancing Roman right division? We've got a lot to think about here. As you can see, that this Roman right is so deep, it almost screams to be surrounded by troops. But again, this is a top-down view. This is more of a hands-off. What happens? So I'm going to have to figure out a dice roll for decision-making for the Iberians in this next order phase coming up, whether they take advantage of this Roman cohort that has moved so far forward. If you look, a lot of the battles, I can't remember if it's Pinda or Cynocephaly for the Macedonians and the Greeks. When they were fighting the Romans, there was kind of an incident where this kind of happened, but in reverse, where the Macedonians, the Greeks and the Macedonians were advancing and pushing one division back, and then what happened was they wound up opening up one of their flanks because the other division wasn't there yet, or it got beaten, and so they were kind of out there in the air all by themselves. So there's a lot of historical precedent for this sort of stuff. So I'm going to have to kind of decide what kind of dice roll I'm going to use to decide what sort of tactical decision the Iberians are going to make. Well, this brings us to the end of this video. I hope you guys kind of like this kind of stuff. It's kind of fun doing. Give me a thumbs up if you like this sort of thing. Comment down below. If you don't, if you think I'm just wacky as all hell, just leave me a message. I've been called crazy before. We still got 2 more cards to play for our opposing commanders here. Kind of see what's going to happen with those. But again, a lot of decisions to be made. And what happens if that Iberian commander, he passes his order, but only passes it by 1, and then he turns his flank to the Romans? Lots of things to consider here. Considering, do you take that gamble? Do you take that risk, or do you not? Well, that's enough of this. This video went way longer than what I thought it should. But everybody stay safe, stay well, and I'll see you next time. Hopefully turn 2 should be pretty exciting.